Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of 2025 of Two Wizards and a Mic. Basically, we're a couple of old dudes who like to talk about D&D, and we want you to have a better game at your table, so pearls of wisdom fall from our lips all the time. Or I just say things like, that's cool! But welcome to this new year. Hello, Andrew. Happy New Year.
Hey Shane, happy New Year to you. How you doing?
Not too bad. Just overcoming this cold that I had for the past week and a little bit, but I'm feeling better. It seems that that was my introduction to the year, which I was quite happy with because I could sleep for a few days and things were great. I assume that Santa was good to you and everybody, and was able to provide you with how many books for D&D did you receive?
Yeah, I got I did get some more terrain, which is always useful.
Excellent.
And actually one really great book I got was a book that is filled with old words that people don't use anymore. Mostly kind of I think ones from Old English, but they're really great
Ooh.
for names of characters. Um like actually one of the old words is Scaramouche, which I think is a character in is it Pinball Wizard, I think, Scaramouche.
Scaramouche and Pinball Wizard. I'm going to the Googles.
Anyway, it's a character in a famous story. It's actually a word. It means something. And like actually the word Dumbledore, it's not in this book, but Dumbledore is a really old English word for bumblebee. Um, so yeah, anyway, the book is filled with great names. And the next adventure, which we're going to kickstart at the end of next month, that one I've got all these names from that book that just are fit me,
Oh,
just are perfect names.
nice.
Um, and then one of my players was super generous and gave like a dice set, a brand new dice set, the other night.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Excellent. And what is it, anything special about the dice set?
It is. It's Beetle and Grimm's who make these sort of custom high-end D&D items. It's a really good-looking set, and we'll see the quality and how balanced they are when I roll them. But most dice that I've had actually are pretty good. I can think of only one that I bought that were definitely unbalanced and in the favor of the DM. And to my players' great pleasure, I got rid of them. So
I actually had a conversation with some friends of mine back, and their kids, actually, specifically their children, who are now at sort of the 12, 13-year age range. And one of them was talking about wanting to get some more dice from I've forgotten the vendor they were talking about, somebody I hadn't heard of. But I said, "Oh, those look really great. That's kind of nice." And then he goes, "So, do you think they're balanced?" And I'm looking at some of the products, and I'm seeing like uh, sparkles in one, which I think was okay, but there were tons that had all kinds of One had little tiny baby ducks in it. One had little
yeah,
dogs, and I'm like, honestly, I don't. If you put in like objects like that,
yeah.
um, unless they're almost weightless, you're gonna have like unbalanced dice all the time. And I mean, it looks cool, sure, but if you were trying to like roll something, and you over time, you'd probably figure out that why do we always see the face of that particular dog in my top of my D20? So I said, you know, there should be a rule, honestly, for DMs to like look at people's dice and kind of go, I don't know, that dice has something in it that kind of like makes me wonder if it's weighted to that particular
Yeah,
side, and
yeah. No,
because it's
I
pretty hard
have
to
done that.
tell.
I've done that for someone who at our table kept bringing or brought dice a couple of times that you couldn't read clearly. And I said, no, like you can't, I can't read it. Like, I mean, they
Here's
could
a
be
little thing
old.
of wax.
Yeah, exactly. The world's worst crayon that, we got in 1977 to fill in our own dice, that just disintegrated as you were filling in the dice. No, they were just, you couldn't read it. I said, you can't use those. If we can't read it, clearly, then you can't use them.
It's so
Yeah. What if my
sad.
extreme rules?
Your extreme rules that make your table so much more fun. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's such weird things like that at the table that can happen. But at the same time, maybe the dice is weighted where it's rolling ones all the time. So that's not such a
Yeah.
bad thing. Dear Player X, you've died again. But today, uh, we are talking about some more World of Mirror stuff. Specifically, the continent of Zogg, because it's one of the larger ones. It's not the largest, but it's
Um,
pretty big.
Probably the largest. Yeah, I think it might be if you take out if you look at all the land area. Yeah, we're going to look at Zog today, which is pretty much the largest continent to the far left there. It's definitely the most populated. So on the far western side of this map, left side. I should mention really quickly with the Kickstarters, because we have so many things going on. The Mushroom King Kickstarter, the book should be the book of the second proof, because we had to change a few things. That should arrive any day. And so probably we'll start ordering the books by the end of this month. And they probably and some in the Canada and the US will probably start shipping. And then the next adventure, the Rivenhelm, I'm actually finishing the manuscript right now, and it should be done this week. And so the PDF for that will probably be ready in February and likely to ship in March. And then the other news, which I just mentioned, is that the third adventure will be coming to BackerKit because we're leaving Kickstarter to do crowdfunding, and we're going to BackerKit for that one now. Um,
Nice,
that should be the end of February, and we'll have more news about that. I already have the first 5 pieces of art for that
excellent,
third adventure. So that's just a quick overview. Yeah, as far as Zog, so this is part of our World of Myrr um, campaign setting, which is released now. We'll put the links below. Um, the book is 232 pages, and it's a world with 9 continents, as Shane just showed on the map. And the largest, definitely the most populated, is Zog. This is your traditional high fantasy medieval world with magic. There's Zog just by itself, and it's surrounded by a few seas. You can see here Salamar Sea, the Sea of Haon, the Strait of Argus, and the Sea of Tharn. So it is also interesting because it is the only one of the continents that has borders for kingdoms, because most of the other parts of the world are not as populated, and they're more based around city states and settlements. This continent, Zog, actually has over 20 kingdoms, and they have borders. Um, and it's a land of there's a lot of mountains you can see, a lot of forest, and so this is where it began actually. So if you look right at the beginning there, right in the middle, that's Rogan's Gate. That was the first human settlement. So elves came here about 200,000 years ago from Feyland and Nairn. And they found that there were already goblins and orcs here. So goblins, orcs actually were the original creatures here. And then
oh really?
later, yeah, later dwarves and humans, and then and halflings, a few other races came, and the humans spread out from Rogan's Gate. And now it's the biggest human, it's most populated by humans. And yeah, they have settled in a few other places in the world, but this is where most humans live in the world of Mir. And right in that middle part, Rogan's Gate is a free city, city state, and Rivenhelm its neighbor. But all the other kingdoms have more settlements in them. They're not free cities. And
So they're all very unique and on their own kind of thing.
Yeah, they're
City,
quite,
city,
yeah.
state, like that kind of thing.
Well, no, just the only two city states on Zog are Rogan's Gate and Rivenhelm, and they're enormous. They're the biggest cities on Zog and in the world. The rest of the kingdoms are not city states. They're your traditional kingdom with a capital, a
Right.
town, and maybe some villages. And the humans and the elves pushed out the evil humanoids, the orcs and the goblins, and kind of further away from the center of Zog. And to the south of Rogan's Gate, where you see those twin peaks, that forest, that's where the elf kingdom is. And then down here is another kingdom called Misthaven or Mistland around that forest. And it's kind of like the Wild West, that kingdom. Like you can just as easily run into a vampire as you can run into a knight. It's the most kind of chaotic part of the world, but also the most free part of the world. And then the opposite is just to the corner to the left there. There's a land that's run by an evil church who are extremely strict, and they are actually starting to expand their territory and have invaded a couple of settlements in the area. Um, so they're definitely a threat. And all the people there worship the god of domination named Vox, an evil deity.
Okay. Just looking at different areas around the.
Yeah, so this is one of the most far-flung places, and it's called Farland, and it's really in the middle of like it's in the middle of nowhere. Nobody really knows a lot about it. It's not very populated. There's a huge swamp there called Fool's Marsh, and yeah, it's kind of a mysterious area. I can only give certain amount of things away today because Shane's actually playing in this world.
Oh, la 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 la. See, I can't hear anything with my headphones on. La la.
Yeah.
La. I'm actually kind of excited to explore more of this continent because we've uh, the characters that we're currently playing. How far? Actually, you know what? Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I want it to be a surprise.
Yeah, you've barely scratched the surface of this world in our story so far. There's a lot more going on. One of the big events that's happened is about 500 years ago, um, undead took over the far eastern portion of the continent, and it's now called the Void. This territory, and it's extremely dangerous. And there's an ongoing war on the border of this territory, and whole group of the mostly good aligned kingdoms have sent an army there to basically to hold the line. And it's sort of like the DMZ zone in Korea, or the wall in a way in Germany, but it's the border between these two fighting groups. And this void is now that's really the reason that the migration of humans from Zog to the continent of Mir, which is the central continent in the world and much smaller, and that's where you began your adventure, Shane. The
Ah,
reason why people from Zog haven't kept going there is because the void's in the way. And these undead are also in the ocean and the mountains, and they have ghost ships as well. So yeah, it's an ongoing issue on Zog and has been for a long time. And in a way, the continent of Zog is sort of like the old Republic,
oh,
sort of like the prequels in Star Wars.
okay,
And Mir is more like the original trilogy, where Zog is much older. Things are run down, or sorry, um, things in Mir have sort of got run down over time because they don't have the connection back to Zog anymore, and
right.
it's a much smaller population. Like if you took the two largest cities on Mir, they're still not as big as Rogan's Gate or Rivenhelm put together. So Zog is much bigger.
And that's the nice thing about uh, having the ability to really separate and create a history, because you have that lived history feeling of, Lord of the Rings, and you've characters wandering around, and there's always some kind of ruin that they're walking by,
Exactly.
and that's kind of a really quintessential but kind of necessary world building tool, is that uh, not everything just popped up yesterday. These characters, like the, and this is, we've talked about this before, about sort of that organic feeling of if you have a dungeon, and you have a number of creatures that actually live within that dungeon, you kind of want to have an idea that there was an organic growth to that, where you've got these characters that are going to the dungeon for a reason that's important to the characters, or important to somebody they're working for, and the creatures you encounter are not just like, well, I'm gonna put an ooze right there for, yeah, and so then I'm gonna throw some vampires over here, and then, like, to me that kind of makes no sense. Like, you're going to a place, and sure, if there's a vampire there, the vampire is either has some kind of backstory that hopefully the characters take the time to learn about. Oh, by the way, I heard there might be a vampire there, because it's like, I moved here because my castle was burned or whatever. But on a grander scale, when you have like Zogg as a place where there's a lot of history to it, versus Myrr, which has a lot of history as well, but you kind of, over time you kind of recognize features are much older in other areas, and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And I like that kind of stuff. It makes it worth playing, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think, yeah, 100%. You got to ground fantasy and sci-fi, I think, in some sort of reality. Otherwise, it feels really disconnected. And um, yeah, 100%. We actually have a supplement called The History of Mir, which has the timelines for all 9 continents. So people can pick that up. Well, we don't have it actually. We've only had it for Kickstarter backers, but we'll see about publishing that as well. And
That'd be cool.
what we'll probably do, one thing we could do actually, is add it with the download of the World of Myrr. If you purchase it from our website, we might do that. But there's 3 supplements. There's the history, which has timelines for every continent. There's one that has factions for the continent. It gives more detail than the book. And then we have a huge one, which I'm finishing now, which has all the inns and taverns in the world. Um, so that should be done hopefully next month. But it's taking longer than what I expected. So yeah, it is quite detailed. Like, the other thing there is there's actually a calendar for many of the humanoids for different parts of the world. So this is the one for Zog. So there's actually different names for the days of the week in Zog. So instead of Monday to Sunday, it's Good Day. Yeah, those are the pages. It's Good Day, River Day, Hill Day, Woods Day, Rest Day, Field Day, and Sky Day. And then instead of months, there's 4 sun quarters, which basically take 3 months each. And you have bloom time, sun time, moon time, and dream time. And that would be sort of the equivalent of spring, summer, fall, and winter. And then each of those sun quarters, at the end of them, there's a week-long festival. And those are the elements: water, fire, earth, and wind. So there's a lot of detail. It tells you about the weather. Like, Zog, for the most part, is quite temperate, fairly mild, but the southern part is a fair bit warmer. It's not a desert, but it's a bit warmer. And the top, in the winter time, in dream time, the north part of the continent is quite cold. Um, and we also have information about traveling around, the mounts that people would use. Like, for instance, elves use elk mostly. Dwarves use bears or horses. Orcs and goblins use wargs. And there's information about tolls, and then about the different groups, the different races that have come to Zog, or in the orcs and goblins case, actually have always lived here.
Who are actually, I, when you mentioned tolls, and then right after goblins, I'm like, there must be tolls being collected by goblins, or would they just attack people in general? I kind of wonder that actually. I don't know why that popped into my mind, but
Yeah,
I'm
they're
like,
not
because I'm
usually
picturing the
organized.
goblin under the bridge kind of thing.
Yeah, no, these are different kinds of that was yeah, different kinds of goblins. So that was the troll usually under the bridge.
Oh, troll, right? It's troll,
Troll,
right,
yeah,
right,
the
right.
troll bridge or the toll bridge. Um, yeah, no, there's tolls usually for most large cities and some towns, and the goblins aren't organized enough to do that. But that does remind me of a funny story when I lived in Whistler a long time ago, like 30 years ago or something now, where there was a big party once at this huge old log cabin. Regularly, there were parties there. And this is much like the goblins that you just talked about, because at one point I heard at this one party one night, these three guys, everybody was just arriving and going in and coming out and stuff. They just decided to set themselves up as the bouncers at the front of the door, the front of the house of this cabin, and collect $5 a person, and they did this for several hours and then they just left.
You know, that's kind of brilliant. That is kind of brilliant. I wonder
Yeah.
how much they got away with. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something goblins might come up with. Um, yeah, so there's many conflicts around Zog, which we really built the world of Mir as this world that's kind of like it's right on the edge of all this, different conflicts breaking out, and some have already broken out, and so you have a great place where there's a lot I was talking about. That's the illustration of what the void is like.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that shows the undead army and one of our monsters. So many of basically all the monsters from our monster books, we have places for them in this world, and that's one of them. That huge
That's
mount.
so weird. How is that possible that you've
Yeah,
created these monster books for the last few years, and then suddenly they're living in the world of
yeah.
Mir?
Now
What? What?
they have a home to live. Um, so yeah, there's the big war in the Borderlands. There's the that evil church who wants to basically invade the world. There's another kingdom where the leader is a frustrated former general who's basically built this militocracy, this totally militarized land, and that's never a good thing to have on your border. Um, there's spies everywhere. There's one continent which you played a little bit in where there's not really a government. There's no monarchy. It's basically just a corporation, a company, a large trading guild that just rules the whole land, and everybody, who leads a settlement, and all the guards and everybody are hired by this trading guild. So um, yeah, that's an issue too, right? When they have that much power. So there's lots of factions, influential families. There's that High Council I mentioned who are fighting the undead, which is a treaty with a number of nations. There's a Wizard Council, which has quite a bit of power. And all those wizards are in our Monsters of the Wilderness book. And then there's, of course, you've got the Thieves Guild around. Um, yeah. And then, as we said, all the monsters from our monster series are in the world, although the most of the fey creatures are and the underworld creatures are usually in those areas. They're not usually wandering the land. Um, Although there are a number of fey creatures who are in the world already. And I should mention a little bit about the structure of the whole world, because you have the world of Mir, which is on the material plane, and
Right.
Feyland is also on the material plane, um, but sort of in a hidden dimension in a way. But so you can travel. It is possible to travel from Mir into Feyland, even if you don't use the portals. There is travel, and then the underworld is just beneath the world of Mir, and then you have the outer planes. So like hell is where the devils are. We have a place called the chasm where the demons are, and the elemental planes where the elementals are. And then way in the distance are planes where the aberrations come from, who are basically like aliens. And even further away is a place called the Source, where deities and angels and some monsters live. So when a humanoid dies, they head off, their soul heads off across this place called the Night Sea. And if their journey is successful, they go back to the source where the deities are. If they're unsuccessful, or they're corrupted by necromancy, then they come back as undead. And then also people can be reincarnated as well. Um, Usually it's a druid who's doing something like that. But there is a like a cosmology, there is a structure to the world as well you can use. And overall, it is a place where it's very easy though to do homebrew. So like if you had an adventure, like Shane was mentioning vampire earlier, if you had an adventure with a vampire, about a vampire, there's perfect places to have that in this world, which we mention in the book actually. If you had an adventure with pirates or giants or some of these traditional fantasy elements like cults and um, a good king or an evil king, all of those have places in this world because we've used those traditional archetypes.
Right, right, right. That's actually I like the idea of the going a little bit earlier to what you're saying about the night sea and those kinds of things. Right away, my brain was like, "What happens if you have a character who dies? What kind of and they reincarnate him? What kind of consequences are there?" Because I was thinking right away, I'm like, Night Seal, that's cool. That's pretty. So what happens if they come back? And then uh, I thought the Flatliners popped into my mind. I'm like,
Mm.
what did that care? Oh, so your character's now reincarnated. Blah blah blah. You can continue your adventure, but what did they bring back from the Night Sea? And that kind of thing. I thought that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and that's really the inspiration that we want to build in there into the world is give you, lots of possibilities that you could play with, right? And another thing that's different is the way that lycanthropy and vampirism work. It's more, there's more to it than the regular game.
Right,
Um,
right.
and that was really inspired, and we mentioned this before, by Skyrim, where if you haven't discovered that you are turning into a vampire, you have to go on a quest to get rid of the disease. And lycanthropy as well. There's a whole story and quest around that. So that's the same in Mir too. There's more to it. Um, but yeah, there are ways. I mean, and we were inspired by the world of Greyhawk that Gary Gygax made, because there are ways to create a world where you have a lot of these indestructible archetypes, so that it's quite easy for anybody, any DM, to take their adventures, their campaigns, and it's going to fit quite well into this world. And so you can basically use the lore um, how you want. If you want to use this as a template and not use every bit of the lore, that's great. Whatever works. If you want to use all of the lore that we have, it's all there.
Well, especially since I mean, from everything that I've read, I mean, I haven't read every single page yet,
What?
but I know. What's
You
this
had
life
homework
you have to
on
live?
the holidays.
I know. I failed miserably. Uh, but again, this is something I've brought up before about the whole oceans in Mir,
Right.
and I like the idea of uh, being presented with, okay, this is the world, blah blah blah. The oceans are really not places that people like to go. They tend to stick to the coastline. They don't travel from continent that often via boat, and because reasons. And but it's always been described as dangerous, um, There's large creatures there you don't want to tangle with. Uh, but people just tend not to do it, which to me is like 3 bullet points of okay, here's how the oceans work. And then of course right away it's like okay, well, what if there's an adventure where you have to, for whatever reason, go on a boat from Zogg to Myrr or from one
Yeah.
continent to another, um, or even in an adventure, a larger adventure where you have to do the same thing. But it kind of gives you that inspiration like right away. Like I think, okay, well, what kind of things are going to happen? Like what kind of things can they go a particular route that might be less dangerous or whatever? But it kind of gets those juices going, which I really like. There's not, um, there's a lot of detail in Lord of the Rings, but ultimately, who knows what the heck has happened east of Mordor? Well, you know what? There's a TV show that has dug into a bit of the lore, and they're like, he never actually said what happened out there. He gave us ideas. There were like the blue wizards went this way, and there's all these kinds of things. But the amount of detail is so minuscule that it kind of gives you that okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, I'm pretending I'm a writer of a TV show. I'm going to write this show and we're going to go that direction, see what
So did
happens.
they. They also pretended they were writers of the TV show.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that there's all these things that creative types can actually dig into, and especially
Yeah.
with things like the World of Mirror, you can go, Andrew, your ideas are great, but to hell with all of it. But I love this ocean. I love this, and they can actually populate with whatever,
Yeah.
which is really kind of cool. Hopefully, they're populating it with monster books, but there's all kinds of opportunity for DMs to also react. I think that's actually one of the critical things for any game master is you are able to do to create an adventure or to follow a previously made adventure, but at the same time, as you always point out, that what if everybody just wants to turn left? Like my adventure is over on the right,
Yeah.
but if they all decide to go left and there's no way I can kind of gently nudge them that
Yeah.
way, then you have the ability to go, okay, well, what's actually over there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have there. Here's some encounters I could totally have. I'll just improv a bunch of stuff, and it'll bring them back to where the main adventure is,
Yeah.
rather than because I've had so many games where you get railroaded because the DM is like, oh my god, this is what you have to do, um, rather than just kind of gently nudging the story to actually organically go back to where the main story is supposed to
Right.
be,
Right.
but
Yeah.
allowing that freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually in this book too, we have a lot of encounter tables and events tables too. So there's things to help the DM improv. And then it's funny you mentioned this, maybe to wrap up tonight, that you've just mentioned. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out what's going on between Zog and Mir because of this difficulty traveling back and forth? Because there were waves of settlers and ships, and then it just pretty much stopped. And some people that don't even, and a lot of people in Mir don't know why. Well, guess what? Our next adventure that is going to link into this. So it's going to tie directly into that, and it's
That's
going to
very
be
cool.
quite different. Yeah, and it's going to be quite different than the first two. It's going to be actually back in Mir, and it's going to be very different than our mushroom flavor Fey invasion with the first two stories. Um, we're going peak shroom with that, but after that's done, we're going to do something quite different.
As you should, because you've already laid the foundation for all of these adventures around the Mushroom King, and the Mushroom Invasion, and but that's only that is a very small place in a much larger world. And yeah, I encourage you to create adventures all over the place, because that's one thing I've actually been disappointed uh, with like Greyhawk and those kinds of things, where the adventures are great, but I look at the map every once in a while and I'm like, what the hell is over here? Like you
Mm,
kind of get an idea, but again, they've laid the foundation. They've said, okay, over here you're going to encounter these groups of people. You're going to encounter this sort of stuff, but ultimately, uh, make it up. just we've given you the platform, and if you want to say that that particular I don't know, castle or that particular kingdom are different than maybe what we've implied, then why not? Just what is this game all about? I think it's having
It's a three-letter word.
fun.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, I know people who don't know the game and they say when we watch you play, it just looks like you guys are laughing and telling jokes and goofing around for 4 hours around the table. Well, yeah, that's
It's kind of right. It's kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
I mean, especially when you have like really enthusiastic players and an enthusiastic DM, uh, there's such possibility. As we always say, like that's all you really need is what is going to happen. Don't know, but here's some stuff that could happen, and
yeah,
then you can actually I don't know, discover it as you go. Which that to me is like the most important piece. Is
yeah,
figure it
yeah.
out. Don't tell
Well,
me what's
sure.
going to happen, Andrew.
Sorry.
Don't tell me what's going to happen, but I want to know. You
Yeah,
know, but I'll figure it out as I go.
yeah. Although I think there is a balance. I talked to someone last year. Um, they actually might come on our show. They're interested in coming on Two Wizards.
That'd be
Um,
cool.
and he interviewed me, and we talked about how you've got to still have some structure. Like, there's a lot of people now. We're kind of in the time of of authority doesn't mean anything, and wisdom and knowledge are not as important. I'm just as good. Don't hurt anybody's feelings. Um, but that's not actually just. It's just not real. Um, it does matter that you have a game that has some kind of structure and rules that work. I mean, I'm sure there's some people. I mean, experienced DMs. I mean, I could too. Just run a game and do improv every night, like improv every D&D night, and we would have a certain amount of fun. But with a game that moves really smoothly, like 2014 5e, original 5e, um, it is it is so well designed that it helps, you know, facilitate a really great game. And so, I think there's a balance. Like again, like this idea where people say, "Oh, DMs, you don't need to prep at all, just improv it." Okay, you can have games like that, and you can have fun. Um, but if you I think for most people, if you do some more planning and you follow most of the rules in the game, it gives a kind of structure that the players know and trust and understand, so that the game works for most tables, I think, more smoothly. I'm not saying there aren't tables who are totally improv and, you know, everything is, on the table. Um, People can do that, but I don't think that's that easy to do, especially for new DMs. And yeah, I think in general, it's still good to have some boundaries and structure. And I don't, and I'm not saying follow every rule and don't have house rules, but I think, if your players don't like, if everything's a house rule and everything's the rule of cool, the players don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like
It's yeah.
there's no structure to it, right?
Well, it's like that whole conversation that we've had many, many times about the introduction of technology to the table, where it's even gone to the point where it's uh, the table is a piece of technology, where you have those things where it's like a TV in the table kind of idea, or you have the really crazy things where they set up a large environment that you're going to be in that has got smoke and lights and all whatever. When uh, the argument that I've always had, and I know that you share, is all you need is a pencil and a piece of paper. You don't necessarily need dice. It helps, of course, but really you could get away with other ways of making count of doing counting or whatever. But that is the level. What's the word I'm looking for? The phrase. That's where the
Level playing field?
field. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So that anyone can come to the table, throw their dice down, have a piece of paper, have a pencil, and
and know what's
join.
going on.
Yeah, exactly. Where I find that a lot of the technology, and I went through this when I came back to the game a number of years ago, where I was always being inundated with all these different technologies and things. And sure, they were great, and I liked using them, but ultimately, after playing with like 4 or 5 different methods of tracking information, blah blah blah, it was when I saw somebody come to a table with a tablet, and that's where I said, "Oh, I'm out. There's no way in hell I'm going to rely on a tablet just so I can look at a character sheet." Like to me, that's kind of defeats the whole purpose, because I would never want people to come to a game and feel like they had to bring a tablet. What if they didn't have one, or if they had a crappy one, or like you could. There's paper everywhere in my home anyway, but it's such a simple thing to have, and I think that a lot of that other stuff over time kind of just takes away from the game. But that's just me. Because I have paper and a bunch of monster books. So what else do I need, really, when it comes down to it?
Just the
20,
World of Myrrh
2014 books. I haven't even looked at the new books at all. Like I have no interest in doing that. I don't. No,
Yeah.
no. I'm sorry. It's.
Well, if it was the same team and they'd updated it, um, I might be interested, but
But there's a big difference between updating to make things better and
yeah,
updating for the sake of updating. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of.
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
and Wizards is not the only company that has done this. Like
oh no.
there's tons of them out there, uh, where it's like reading a one of your favorite series. You're 3 or 4 books in, and then you can see the changes happening that are very not organic, and you
Yeah,
could see that publisher said, hey, if you add sparkly vampires,
right,
your
right.
book's going to
Yeah,
do way better.
yeah,
So, and it's like, rather than having the author kind of come up with that on their own or not,
yeah,
what is the story? That's why I'm here, and I think that there are definitely ways to do that and ways not to, and yeah. But on that note, we've been recording for a while. We've talked about Zogg today, and of course, everything that we've talked about, there will be links down in the thing. And if you are listening to this, go to YouTube. The links are there. So, although for those who are playing along with the audio version, I have been, and this is actually in the last like 4 or 5 episodes, I've been waiting for those links to be written up, and then I just copy them over to the audio so that they're available there as well. And yeah, so thank you all for listening and watching. Any final words before we close down the first episode of 2025?
yeah. I'll put the links below for the World of Myrr and for the monster books. And there should be Kickstarter updates coming to Kickstarter. Probably next week I'll put some more updates, but I gave some hints to that, a little bit of a summary at the beginning of this episode as well. And
Excellent.
then yeah, it won't be too long until we start teasing the new adventure, the third adventure.
I'm very happy about that. Anyway, we'll see you all next week, if not before, and have a great time at your tables. Don't overthink it. Just have fun. Bye, everybody.
Later.